My sermon passage is Mark chapter 6, verses 14 to 29, page 872 in the Pew Bible. King Herod heard of it, that is, the mission that Jesus had sent the disciples on, for Jesus' name had become known. Some said, John the Baptizer has been raised from the dead. That's why these powers are at work in him. But others said, it is Elijah. And others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. For Herod had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. For John said to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and kept him safe. When he heard him, he was much perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly. But an opportunity came when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers and officers and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will grant it. And he vowed to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you, even half of my kingdom. And she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptizer. And she came in immediately with haste to the king and asked, saying, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the king was exceedingly sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to her. And immediately the king sent a soldier of the guard and gave orders to bring his head. He went and beheaded him in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard of it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
May God grant us wisdom and courage for interpretation. You can probably tell that I was in a mood when I thought of how to preach this passage today. Thank you, Oklahoma State Schools Superintendent Ryan Walters. And I'm still in a mood. It pains me to have to preach about politics, and this is pure politics. Headline, Ryan Walters, Bible must be taught in schools. Strict compliance expected. Ryan Walters, get back in your lane. See, it's not me bringing politics into the church. It's him swerving out of his lane with his Bible mandate for public school classrooms, which I think surely won't survive legal challenges, but who knows anymore? In case you missed it, or in case in this extended storm season of roiling politics you've just lost track, here's what he's up to, among other controversies. He has ordered all school districts to incorporate the Bible, but he doesn't say which one, as an instructional support into the curriculum for grades 5 through 12, citing its importance as a historical document. Quote, adherence to this mandate is compulsory. Walters ordered. Further instructions for monitoring and reporting on this implementation for the 2024-25 school year will be forthcoming. Immediate and strict compliance is expected, end quote. Now, some folks think, well, it can't hurt. Yes, it can. It's hard enough to teach the Bible, whichever translation, if you're trained to. And I'll bet not many public school teachers are trained to. And that's okay, unless you order them to. It would be like me being ordered to teach algebra. Not going to happen. But here's the real thing. The Bible is best taught in faith communities, beloved communities, by followers of beloved traditions, followers of Jesus, and not solely for purposes of politics, and not as a political prop. All of this noise we're hearing is just politics. It's just like prayer is, quote, allowed in schools, so are Bibles, as teaching aids. As Clifton Adcock with the Frontier nonprofit news organization reported in the Oklahoman, in 2010, the Oklahoma legislature passed, and then Governor Brad Henry signed a bill allowing public high schools to offer students elective courses on the Old and New Testaments of the Christian Bible to teach students, quote, knowledge of biblical content, characters, poetry, and narratives that are prerequisites to understanding contemporary society and culture, including literature, art, music, mores, oratory, and public policy. The law also requires that the class maintain religious neutrality, accommodate other religious perspectives of students, and not promote or disfavor a particular religion or lack of religious belief, or run afoul of state and federal constitutions. And that last part is a requirement for the law to be valid, as Oklahoma's Constitution explicitly, read it, it explicitly prohibits taxpayer money and resources from being spent for religious purposes or instruction. When the legislature tried to remove that state constitutional prohibition via a ballot measure in 2016, Oklahoma voters solidly rejected that attempt. So, what is it that these people really want? It sounds like they've got what they want. So what is it they want besides followers? Here's another news item. He also announced this week that he plans to overhaul state academic standards for social studies. Just him, with a puppet committee. And he named a slate of advisors that included the leaders of conservative think tanks and media personalities. Now, having been something of a small-time media personality myself, I'm telling you, that's a motley crew he's appointed. In the announcement, he said, the revised standards will incorporate the introduction of the Bible as an instructional resource that Superintendent Walters announced last week, as well as ensuring that social studies reflect accuracy and not political slanted viewpoints, the announcement said with a straight face. Now, there's been some wisecracking about all of this. I'm pretty sure the Satanic Temple would like a word. I mean, it exists for this kind of thing. And that makes sense because the Satanic Temple is a political organization, not, quote, religious in the usual sense that we mean religious. It's a secular civil rights group. And here's what the so-called Satanists say they do. Feel free to count the ones you agree with. We have publicly confronted hate groups. We have fought for the abolition of corporal punishment in public schools, applied for equal representation when religious installations are placed on public property, provided religious exemption and legal protection against laws that unscientifically restrict people's reproductive autonomy, exposed harmful pseudoscientific practitioners in mental health care, organized clubs alongside other after-school clubs in schools besieged by proselytizing organizations, and engaged in other advocacy in accordance with our tenets. Now, depending on the issue, I can stand with them sometimes. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by the use of Satan. Whoever or whatever Satan was or is, Satan and death were defeated at the cross of Christ. Defeated. Love was let loose to curtail hate at the cross of Christ. So, Satan schmaten. Jesus saves. And as Frederick Buechner says, maybe not even the devil himself will be able to resist God's grace forever. I love that. By the way, apparently Satanists don't get along together any better than Christians. On its website, the fairly new Satanic Temple is reformed, so to speak. It takes pains to distance itself from the old Church of Satan. Now keep this in mind when you see scary people try to scare other people by throwing Satan's name around. It says, the Satanic Temple has become the primary religious satanic organization in the world, with congregations internationally and a number of high-profile public campaigns designed to preserve and advance secularism and individual liberties. The rise of the Satanic Temple has been met with an increase in commentary regarding what Satanism is, as media outlets struggle to grasp how this upstart religion has begun to shift religious liberty debates with claims of equal access. Now, this is the funny part to me. With unfortunate regularity, and much to our chagrin, the Satanic Temple is confused with an earlier organization, the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey in the 1960s. The Church of Satan expresses vehement opposition to the campaigns and activities of the Satanic Temple, asserting themselves as the only, quote, true arbiters of Satanism, while the Satanic Temple dismisses the Church of Satan as irrelevant and inactive. Now, if that doesn't sound like about every other denomination of Christianity in the United States, I don't know what does. They've taken sides, drawn lines. Even the Satanists can't get along. Now, enough of that. Ryan Walter's shenanigans with the Bible in public schools is a good setup, though, for my sermon today, which itself is meant as kind of a wisecrack. Coming to elementary school Bible time near you, a cauldron of lust, seduction, power, scandal, and murder, and that's just in 15 verses. So let's get into some of it. Mark 6, verses 14 to 29. Now hear it again from the Message Bible. You know, I know kids are more sophisticated and wiser to the ways of the world now than ever. But imagine trying to teach this without prayer and reflection. And you can't do it under the law with prayer and reflection. Okay? So imagine teaching this, even as just literature, to a bunch of 5th graders or 8th graders or seniors for that matter. It's ugly. And it's the Bible. King Herod heard of all this, for by this time the name of Jesus was on everyone's lips. He said, this has to be John the Baptizer come back from the dead. That's why he's able to work miracles. Others said, no, it's Elijah. Others said, he's a prophet, just like one of the old-time prophets. But Herod wouldn't budge. It's John, sure enough. I cut off his head, and now he's back alive. Herod was the one who had ordered the arrest of John, put him in chains, and sent him to prison at the nagging of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For John had provoked Herod by naming his relationship with Herodias adultery. Herodias, smoldering with hate, wanted to kill him, but didn't dare because Herod was in awe of John. Convinced that he was a holy man, he gave him special treatments. Whenever he listened to him, he was miserable with guilt, and yet he couldn't stay away. Something in John kept pulling him back. But a portentous day arrived when Herod threw a birthday party, inviting all the brass and blue bloods in Galilee. Herodias' daughter entered the banquet hall and danced for the guests. She charmed Herod and the guests. The king said to the girl, ask me anything. I'll give you anything you want. Carried away, he kept on. I swear, I'll split my kingdom with you if you just say so. She went back to her mother and said, what should I ask for? Ask for the head of John the Baptizer. Excited, she ran back to the king and said, I want the head of John the Baptizer served up on a platter, and I want it now. That sobered the king up fast. But unwilling to lose face with his guests, he caved in and let her have her wish. The king sent the executioner off to the prison with orders to bring back John's head. He went, cut off John's head, brought it back on a platter, and presented it to the girl, who gave it to her mother. When John's disciples heard about this, they came and got the body and gave it a decent burial. Now that's gruesome. It was gruesome when I first heard the story as a kid. It's gruesome now. It's what some people call a text of terror, a Bible text of terror, especially since we've learned the past several years that beheadings are not ancient history. It's all there. The cauldron, that's the boiling pot of intrigue in King Herod's court and in his prison, in his banquet hall. And the lust is in the men pleased with the dancing girl. The seduction is in the dancing of the dancing girl. The power is in the king who had John beheaded because he could. And the scandal is that he did, rather than swallow his pride. And murder is murder. All in 15 Bible verses. Now, what in the world is in there for public school students, especially without pastoral care and without spiritual formation? For that matter, what's in it for us here with pastoral and elder care and spiritual formation? It is so ugly and gruesome. Well, here's why. And it would probably fall on deaf ears among the proponents of the Bible in the classroom, because I'm positive that they are the God said it, I believe it, that settles it kind. You know, the take it all or leave it all kind of Bible fan who mistakes inspired words for infallible words, making the Bible an idol. Well, here's what's in it for us, I think, in this gruesome story of the beheading of John the Baptist. Not just the drama of life and death, of love and hate, of lust and seduction, of power and scandal and murder, not just all that. It's the great contest of their time and of our time and of all time. It's the struggle between truth and power. It's the struggle between prophetic truth and political power. Between John the Baptizer and Herod the king. It's against those two. But light and dark and good and evil are mixed in both. It seems obvious with Herod. As theologian Douglas John Hall points out, like Paul, Herod too might well confess, I find that when I want to do what is good, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God. I delight in the law of God in my inmost self, but I see in my members another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am. And Hall goes on, but we do no service to biblical faith when we make John the Baptist, on the other hand, the example par excellence of pure goodness. Wasn't there some reason both the mother and the daughter were so faithfully attracted to him? Could it not be, as it has so often been with the heroes of morality, that his heroic self-discipline cloaks a passionate libido, rendering him all the more subject to the sin of pride? Now, I have not heard that before, but could it not be? It could. These are human beings. These are real people. Hall goes on, what makes the encounter of the prophet and the king so poignant is that they understand each other well enough. The puppet king knows enough about truth to recognize his own falseness, and the prophet is sufficiently acquainted with temptation to desire his monarch's liberation from it. You can't sleep with your brothers. Why? Their meeting could have been redemptive, but one great flaw prevented it. Herod's insatiable quest for preeminence. Having it, keeping it, and flaunting it. That sex is prominent in this account is not surprising, for as has been said famously by Henry Kissinger, no doubt, believe it or not, power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. The insatiable quest for preeminence, having it and keeping it and flaunting it is what this passage is about. Not sexual lust, but lust for power. And that is another reason this passage is fitting to consider in the rush of an alleged public servant to command what amounts to civic idolatry of the Bible. Immediate and strict compliance expected.